Hello everyone, back tuning in today's third video, doing CFS 6 months look ahead for today's third video. So, as the name implies, we're going to go 6 months ahead with the long-range CFS V2 model. It's going to take us from next month, from September right way through to February 2019. So we cover the full autumn and also, yes, the full winter 2018-19 period with this update. So I think you've been waiting for this one, and you're going to see what the CFS is predicting for the next 6 months. Will it be time to get behind the stage long or not? You'll find out in about 2 minutes. But before I get on with that, just to say that earlier on today we released the weekend forecast, so you can find that video on the page for the weather forecast for the week ahead. And also, of course, we had our regular week to 10-day video update as well. And that video is on the homepage. It's going to be a big weekend of updates, or it is a big weekend of updates. So I'll talk you through what's happening tomorrow at the end of the CFS 6 months look ahead. But without further ado, let's crack on. And we're going to start off by having a look at 700 millibar height anomaly flow charts for the next 6 months, and then we'll have a look at the corresponding temperature and precipitation anomalies that go with those heights. Just to say that this is just for fun, so it's to have a bit of a laugh. The charts today, might as well look at them, but don't please take this too seriously. The first month or two does have some scientific merit, so September, October, yes, hopefully we might get a bit of a snapshot of what could be happening in those 2 months. But beyond that, really, you have got to take this with a very, very large warning. I shouldn't really be doing this at all, but I've enjoyed doing these over the years, and people seem to enjoy watching them. So I'll show you the charts. They are there to be looked at, but don't, please, take it too seriously. Right, let's get on with it, man. We're going to start off with 700 millibar height anomaly charts for September. So this is just a couple of weeks away now. Hopefully, if everything is working as it should do, if the model is working correctly, then this is the most reliable part of all of the update. So we've got the yellow colours, of course, yellow, orange, red, extrapolating to above average heights, which is high pressure. Blues extrapolate to below average heights, which is low pressure. So in September, the CFS V2 is forecasting us to have an area of above average heights through the middle of the northern Atlantic Ocean, with a weak trough of below average heights to the north of Scotland. And so the flow and the jet is doing something rather like that, bringing in a flat sort of westerly flow from off the Atlantic. Notice the ridge that has given us, or did give us, such a very hot summer over Scandinavia has been pushed a long way now away from us to the east. So there's no real high pressure to our east here to lock us into settle weather, and so overall I would suspect that's actually probably quite an unsettled and relatively cool September being predicted there, albeit the below average heights is a weak area, so it's not like we've got a big trough there churning away around the UK. So it's quite weak with the below average heights, but nevertheless, the way it's all lining up, and the fact that we don't have any high pressure of note over Scandinavia to lock us into warm easterly winds, I think that's probably quite an unsettled and maybe relatively cool signal to start us off in September. Then we go through to October, and October's 700 millibar height anomaly is looking like this, with above average height centred a little bit to the west and southwest of us. Not much else to go on. Again, the jet stream could be going something rather like that across the Atlantic into the UK. And so, again, that's probably bringing, I think it's probably bringing drier conditions compared to September, because the above average heights is closer to us in October than it is in September, really. But nevertheless, still quite a westerly setup. It could still be changeable, particularly so up in the north. Not a huge amount to go on, though, in October. And then we're through to November, and in November we're looking at an area of below average heights over top of the UK, so that could be a very unsettled month. Notice this yellow that we've got appearing up here to our north. That's hints of a little bit of a northern blocking maybe during November. So actually, the model is lining this up so that we are still bringing up the air from a west-southwesterly direction. But you would only have to change this ever so slightly. Just move this trough to be centred more there as opposed to there. Just centre that trough a little bit to the east of the UK. Strengthen this area of above average heights up to our north, and that could start to pull down much colder air into that trough of low pressure. So November there is very, very, very close to producing quite a cold and wintry month, would you believe? Only has to make very subtle adjustments, and November could be cold and wintry. As it is, the model will probably be forecasting mild and wet in November. That's December, and this is looking quite interesting as well. So we get an area of above average heights centred a little bit to the northeast of the country. There's an area of above average heights in the middle of the Atlantic, but it is displaced further southwest of the Azores. So it's more getting more towards Bermuda, really, with below average heights to the south of Greenland. Looks like the Atlantic and the jet stream is relatively weak here, and probably doing something a bit like that. A bit of a split could be taking place during December, and that could leave us bringing in cold easterly winds. So December could be setting up a cold pattern, but bear in mind this is month 4, so it is in the just for fun range. But certainly November, December both have options to play with from a cold perspective in terms of those 700 millibar heights. Now January 2019 also looking interesting as well. So we've got, let's change the colour, we've got below average heights in the middle of the Atlantic, above average heights into southern Europe and North Africa. So the way they're lining up is that we are actually bringing up quite a mild west-southwesterly wind. But look at all this yellow again that's to our north. Whenever you get this yellow appearing to the north, especially when it starts to move in towards Greenland, that is always going to be a very interesting signal, because it only takes very, very subtle adjustments to bring cold air down from the mid-latitudes when you've got northern blocking. So again, the model will almost certainly be forecasting mild, maybe even very mild conditions, but it is picking up on quite an extensive northern blocking signal here for January to be to the north. And so again, that does hold interest. If you're a cold lover, if you like snow and cold weather, that 700 millibar height anomaly, even if the model is forecasting a mild washout for January, that 700 millibar height anomaly, if you like cold weather and snow, does hold interest. Albeit it's 5 months away, so it's just for fun. And then we go through to February, and this is how February is looking. February 2019 has below average heights just a little bit to the west of the UK. Above average heights are moving over towards the southeastern part of Europe. A lot of that blocking is reduced on our side of the pole, and it's actually pushing over onto the Pacific side of the pole. So there is very extensive northern blocking here, but it's more over towards the sort of Pacific side of the Arctic as opposed to the Atlantic side of the Arctic. So again, model will probably be going for a mild wet month in February. The blocking signal is reducing, but I think all of these months do hold some interest actually from a cold perspective. You have to read between the lines with this, and everything from November onwards does hold a little bit of interest in terms of the 700 millibar height anomalies from a cold perspective. These are not classic zonal sort of westerly Atlantic driven charts by any means. Right, so that's 700 millibar heights done. Let's have a look at the temperature anomalies that go with those heights. We come back to September. This is how the temperature anomaly is looking for Europe and the UK during September. So warmest conditions to average are up here in the northeastern part of Europe. Actually, most central western areas are coming out with average temperature anomalies, even maybe hinting at being a little bit on the cooler than average side for some parts of southern France. There's not much to go from a cool cooler from an average perspective, but average temperature anomalies from this model will actually be quite cool. So that's how September looks with average temperature anomalies. That's October, and in October we're going a little bit warmer than average for Scandinavia. UK and Ireland also coming out a little bit warmer than average in October. Elsewhere across Europe, just generally coming out again close to average, not a big temperature deviation for most parts of Europe. Now this is November, and it's going for a milder than average month across most parts of Europe during November. I want to go back to those height anomalies. So this is the height anomaly for November just here. Again, it has this area of below average heights over the UK, but it is backed a little bit into the Atlantic, and so just about we're hanging on to a westerly, southwesterly flow, but with this area of high pressure blocking up to the north, all we will have to do is shunt this trough more to there, and the blocking will push cold air out of the Arctic into that trough. Right, let's go back to the temperature anomaly. So you can see how it is coming by that temperature anomaly during November, because the trough of low pressure is around there and then backing out into there, and so that's going to be bringing in the wind from a westerly direction. But if that low pressure was to be centered more from here to here to here, and it would only take a slight adjustment of a couple of thousand miles, then we would really start to push down cold air via the high pressure that we've got sitting up here and also around there as well. So it wouldn't take much of an adjustment to bring us a cold November there. As it is, the model is going for a milder than average month in most parts of Europe. The UK and Ireland will be included in that. This is December. Now remember, what's happening in December is that we've got high pressure sitting somewhere around here. So again, it does imply probably bringing in easterly winds during December. Now the model is cooler compared to November. Scandinavia is coming out with a warmer than average temperature anomaly, or a milder than average temperature anomaly during December. That's because high pressure is sitting in that sort of position. So that will bleed the cold air out of the pole and move it down into Europe. I would suspect if the 700 millibar height anomaly came off in December, if this anomaly came off in December, I think we would probably see a significantly colder than average month than the model is showing. There would be areas of Europe that would be colder than average in that scenario, and particularly I would have thought kind of like Germany, Low Countries, France, and yes, possibly the UK, as we bring in those easterly winds via the high pressure that's sitting around there. So generally lop off a couple of degrees in terms of the anomaly there through most parts of Europe during December. That's January, and I told you the model would be going for a milder than average signal in January. It's month 5, so it's not worth worrying about. But the reason that's happening, again, the trough is centered in the Atlantic, so we're bringing in this westerly to southwesterly flow. But again, subtle adjustments with this high pressure up here would allow the potential for something colder to take place during the course of January. So January looks a very mild month across most parts of Europe, but it probably is over top. And then that's February, again, coming out very mild. So the CFS through the winter months, after December anyway, through January and February, months 5 and 6, it's reverting to type and going into very mild conditions, which may be correct. I'm not saying that won't be correct, but from the temperature anomalies, you won't think there's much interest this winter from a cold perspective, but I can tell you from a 700 millibar height anomaly perspective, there is more interest than CFS is showing. Right, going to September in terms of precipitation. Next, this is how we're looking. Most parts of Europe are coming out with average precipitation during September. So again, we've got the high pressure out here. It's drier than average around the west of Spain and Portugal. So that's where all the high pressure is going to be sitting. we're probably going to have low pressure around here. So again, bringing in a westerly flow, doing something a little bit like that. So September's looking very average, really. Average precipitation, average temperatures, rather a westerly month. And of course, that will be quite cool and unsettled compared to what we've been used to through this summer. So a rather cooler and a rather more unsettled signal, really, for September. That's October, and we find, again, Spain, southern parts of France are coming out drier than average, so presumably it's high pressure through there. But elsewhere, it looks like northern Europe is actually close to average, or a little bit above average even, with precipitation during October. That's November. Again, it does look quite interesting. It's drier than average around Norway. It's drier than average around Iceland. So I would have thought we're likely to be having high pressure in this sort of area. Then we've got the low pressure out here and to here. And so that low pressure keeps us into a westerly, southwesterly flow. But if that model is underestimating the strength of the blocking signal at all, really, during November, then the trough is likely going to be placed here to here to here, and so that will pull down colder air, make for potentially quite a wintry, sort of wintry end to the autumn, or an early onset of winter during November. The model is going for above average precipitation for the UK and Ireland, and for much of Europe as well. And then a complete flip as we go through into December. So December is coming out drier than average through this area just here. And again, that's just got the high pressure sitting around there, which would almost certainly be bringing in cold easterly winds during December. So December potentially does look like quite a cold month, actually, on this CFS 6 Month Look-Ahead. But it is month 4, so obviously we've got to be very, very careful about this. But if it's colder and drier, if it's drier, it'll generally be colder in the winter. If it's wetter, it will generally be milder. There are exceptions to that, of course. So a rather cold start to winter, potentially for December, although the model didn't really show anything particularly cold. But I do think we could get a rather cold start to the winter in December. November has some interest from a cold perspective too. Then we go very wet into January. January coming out very wet indeed. We've got a deep area of low pressure to the west of the country, and we're bringing in that westerly flow. Notice again, hints of being a bit drier than average around Norway, hints of being a bit drier than average around Iceland. That's interesting. And then we go through to February. February also looks rather wetter than average for Northern Europe as well. So parts of the UK coming out a little bit wetter than average. Parts of Scandinavia also coming out a little bit wetter than average during February. Both of those 2 months by the CFS B2 are being forecast to be mild and wet, January and February 2019. But I do think I tend to take the temperature and precipitation anomalies less seriously. I like to focus on the heights and the pressure, because that is the key part of the puzzle when you're doing long range forecasting. If you get the heights and the pressure right, then everything else will fall into place. And from a height perspective, and consequently from a pressure perspective, there is interest here from a cold point of view, certainly for November and for December. January and February are too far away to take anything from them, really. Let's come back to September. So that one is looking a rather westerly, kind of average type September, which would include some spells of rain, probably near normal temperatures. Westerly winds coming in from off the Atlantic are going to be close to average with the temperatures in September, which will be a cooler and more unsettled month compared to what we've been used to through this long hot summer. October also looks rather unsettled, probably a little bit milder than average in October. Then it all starts getting interesting for November and December. Both of them hold interest from a cold perspective, I think, anyway, based on the heights and the pressure, and possibly hints of an early onset of winter through November and particularly into December. And then January, February, they're mild, wet, sort of write-off type months, but again, too far away to be concerned about those. In fact, December really is too far away as well. So from a cold perspective, it's really November that you should be focusing on. For the potential anyway, something a little bit colder to be happening there. Right, it's all just for fun. Don't take it too seriously at all. The model will almost certainly look completely different when we come to look at it next month. And of course, that update will take us further into the start of 2019 as well. Right, don't forget to check out today's other two updates. So we did weekend forecast, as I said, and also looked at the 7 to 10 day video update as well. That's on the homepage. Tomorrow we've got our final analogues of the autumn. That's ahead of the autumn forecast, which will be released a week tomorrow. Also, we've got the penultimate Gavs Weatherly Sunday roundup, and we'll have a look at the ECMWF and Meteo France seasonal models. That's going to be quite an interesting update because that's taking us again through the autumn and on into the winter. So come back for all of the updates tomorrow. But 20 minutes, that's all for now for CFS 6 Month Look-Ahead. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.